Great stuff. Welcome back to Level Up, a two-day hybrid event as part of Darrell and Strabane Enterprise Week. We are into the last session, and over the last 2 days, we've been discussing and looking at inspiration, both locally and across the globe, on initiatives, innovation, and people that are making a difference in the way that we live, work, love, and obviously have the rest of our lives together. And that can be anything from social purpose that we've just had on over the last 2 hours, through to entrepreneurship and innovation, through to education, health, wellness. But there seems to be some key words that just keep popping up in all of the sessions. And I think obviously this all links nicely into the fact that diversity and inclusion is perhaps, if not the one thing that unites them all together and is the most important part of leveling up. Because there's key words like community and fairness and accessibility, they keep being mentioned. But how can you have those things if you don't include everybody in the process? How can you include all of those topics without making sure that there is equality for everyone as part of that discussion? And that's why I am delighted that this is the last session of Level Up. Diversity and inclusion is so important to how we shape the economy and how we shape society post-pandemic. So yeah, over the next 2 hours, we're going to be learning about what change and opportunity exists so we're going to thrive in this new economy. But in this conversation, diversity and inclusion is going to be at the heart of that. And I am delighted that Allstate and I are sponsoring this section with, I'm going to say, over 3,000 staff across Belfast, Derry and Strabane. They have diversity and inclusion as a core part of their business model. In fact, obviously, when they do their recruitment, that is something that comes up time and time again. So I'm delighted that Allstate are sponsoring this as a leading organization, having that conversation in Northern Ireland. So we're going to be finding out about what diversity and inclusion means in real terms, in practical terms, why it matters and why it should be at the top of our agendas. And we're going to be looking at some of the initiatives and the people that are driving that change and why it should matter to all of you at home. Okay, we're going to be hearing short bite-sized discussions from Izzy Obeng, Christine White from Diversity Mark NI. We're going to be listening to a panel that I'm going to go through when we go onto the panel, but all I would say is that it's just a fantastic level of speaker from not just in Northern Ireland, but across the UK and further afield. In this section as well, we're not going to have a start-up pitch competition because at 3:40, after this session finishes, there's a new Zoom link that you can jump onto and you can join us for the meeting, which is around announcing the NI startup that's won the Level Up Startup Pitch Competition. And that's been kindly supported by Real Time Recruitment, who are co-sponsoring that. So thank you ever so much to Real Time as well. I'm going to jump straight in and introduce Izzy Obeng, who's going to be presenting to us. Okie dokie. Right, so give me 1 second. We'll just double check that Izzy is with us straight away. If not, perhaps we can jump into the Unlocking the Walled City video just to start things off while we wait for Izzy to join us.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to meet you. Today you're going to get a taste of this beautiful city of Darrell, Derry, Londonderry, Maiden City. Unlock the Walled City is about the history of the city of Derry, Londonderry. It's about the people who've played major roles. It's about the museums. It's about the events. It's a truly, absolutely wonderful city. It's opening the gates to you to allow us to tell you the story of this wonderful city from its birth to its present day. As Derry is a monastic town, we are going from the 6th century right through. So there's so much to know, so much to talk about, so much to learn. It's just waiting to burst the doors open with history. Every corner you turn inside our walled city is breathtaking. This is a city that has suffered. This is a city that has celebrated. This is a city that is telling a story. To embrace the giant spirit, it means everything to the people of the city. To get the opportunity to tell the wonderful story, to give you the experience. to talk about what's happening, to talk about our past, our present, our future. It's all about visiting various areas throughout Northern Ireland, as well as our own city. But it's much more than that. It's about the experience that you will experience. The culture, the food, the bars, the big-hearted people that live in the city. If you were to stop and ask any local person about this city, there's only one word they would say: great.
Right, happy days. Thankfully, Izzy is with us. Izzy was giving me the heebie-jeebies there, just to use a Northern Irish term. I was slightly worrying there for 1 second. But Izzy, I'm hoping you can jump in and join us there on Zoom now.
Hello.
Hello, Izzy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I started panicking then for a second because the guys in the background said, "We can't find Izzy. We can't find Izzy." And I was like, "Oh no, please." I'm so glad you're here. So happy days.
I'm here. Fantastic. Really excited to be here as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for spending the time with us this afternoon. Izzy, I'm just going to run through a little bio for yourself, just to give obviously some kind of accreditation to the amazing work that you've done over the last number of years, to be honest. So I'm just going to read out Izzy's bio, and obviously everyone listening with wonder, to be honest. Izzy Obeng is an entrepreneur and business coach leading Foundervine, a non-profit training and consultancy connecting purpose-driven companies to impactful startups. Foundervine works in partnership with world-leading companies, government, and educational institutions to help diverse founders grow. Since 2018, over 2,000 people have been supported by Foundervine programs. Over 300 startups have launched with a 62% female participation. Izzy is a non-exec director for Capital Enterprise, a body that has raised over 815 million for UK startups, and a non-executive director for Traverse, a consultancy changing the world of public services. She's been featured in the BBC, The Telegraph, The Times, Forbes, and in 2019 was named by Tech Nation as one of the 50 most influential Black voices in UK tech. Izzy, I'm absolutely delighted for you to be here today. Thank you. And obviously, in terms of your presentation, you're going to be talking about Beyond Bias, how to be an ally for diversity in tech. I will let you do that, and then I'll come back and chat with you for 5 minutes, if that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you for that brilliant introduction.
Thank you.
And hello to everyone who is watching at home, at work, wherever you are. As Alistair mentioned, I am Izzy Obeng. I'm Managing Director of Foundervine. And this year, our last year, for many of us, has been pretty tough for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons has been the challenges that as a society, as a globe, we faced around race, around diversity, and how we move forward as a society to address many of the issues that have been uncovered and brought to the fore through some of the challenges that have come as a result of the murder of George Floyd in the US, through the many instances of microaggressions and racial disparities that we face in the UK as well. And so I thought it would be great to speak briefly today about what it means to be an ally for your diverse colleagues, your peers, your community in tech. And a bit more context about what I do. So I have been working across the UK for the last 3 years to help build the pipeline of diversity into the digital and creative industries. It doesn't matter who you are, tech can be quite a tough industry to break into if you don't have the right connections, the right background, the right experiences. And it is Foundervine's mission to level the playing field when it comes to innovation. It's our mission to build a more inclusive ecosystem where it doesn't matter who you are and where you come from, you have access to the same tools, resources, and support to build an incredible organization. So when it comes to being an ally for diversity in tech, I thought it'd be good to share a bit of my own journey. So I started out my career in management consulting in the UK, another industry which recognises that it has a bit of a challenge in terms of diversity inclusion. I worked with many bright, brilliant women and people from diverse backgrounds who at times struggle to find their place within their organisations and get a leg up. And there were often people around us, in different positions, who had the opportunity to be more effective in support, but maybe didn't have the language or didn't have the tools or the understanding of how to be an effective ally. So I'll speak briefly to what that means. So 2019 was a record year for venture capital. I don't know if many of you saw the research from Diversity VC that showed that for every £1 in venture capital that was spent, only 1 penny in that pound went towards an all-female founding team. Only around 10p in every pound went to a mixed gender founding team, and 89p in every pound went to an all-male founding team. That research really opened up a conversation about diversity, gender diversity in the tech space, access to funding, and how inclusive the organizations were in terms of giving funding as well. It started a big conversation about how inclusive venture capital was and what the barriers were towards founders from diverse backgrounds had when it came to accessing funding. What was less spoken about was the fact that in 2019, only 2% of the 10 billion of venture capital that was spent going to teams of ethnic minority founders. Research found that Black entrepreneurs experienced the most underfunding, just 38 Black founders funded in the last 10 years preceding. That's 0.24% of the total funding that was spent. So I won't bore you with stats, but I thought it would be a useful opportunity to spend this time just talking about the small things that each of us can do if we are in a professional environment, particularly if we are working in the tech space, to be a more effective ally for people in your industry or in your community. The first thing I would say is understand that no one is free of bias. I think it's very easy to say that I don't see race, I don't see gender, we're all here, we're all the same. And often in saying that we are colorblind or that we don't see color or race or gender or sexuality, what we do is we inadvertently invalidate and make the experiences of that individual that you are referring to small. It often goes the other way. And it's really important that we acknowledge that people from underrepresented communities, underserved communities, face challenges when it comes to navigating society, navigating work in different ways. And it's so important that we understand that none of us are free of bias. I think about an analogy that I was told a while ago of if you think about this for a second, so humor me for a second. You are going to a conference, just think of this in your mind. You are going to a conference and you have to get a flight to go to the conference, staying in a hotel later. You get on that flight, so imagine this in your mind. You get on that flight, you say hello to the pilot, they welcome you onto the plane, and you sit next to a couple who are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. You get chatting with them on the flight, you get off the flight, and then you go straight to your hotel. You sit in the hotel bar and have some dinner, and you go to the conference the next day. At the conference, your favorite speaker in the world, who's just raised a $10 million investment, is speaking on that stage, and you're really excited. So hold that in your mind for a second. When you were thinking of the pilot, was that pilot black? When you were thinking of the couple that you sat next to on the flight, were they two men? When you think of that speaker on stage who just raised investment, was that a woman? I don't know what the answer is to that there, but it's so important to recognize that none of us are free of bias, and that we take opportunities to learn about how we can combat our bias and recognize when we are making stereotypes about people that are based on our own experiences and things that we've picked up and learned along the way. So that's number one, understanding that we're free of bias, understanding that no one's free of bias. Number two is knowing when to speak out when you see injustice or microaggressions taking place in your workplace, in your office, anywhere like that. Don't think that you can't speak out about something because it's a women's issue or a Black issue or an LGBT plus issue. That doesn't make sense. It's important to recognize the power that you have in your organization. If you're a manager, if you're a leader, if you're someone who supports people in different ways in the organization, the more power and influence you have in your organization, the more responsibility you have to use it. And that could be little things. It could be little things like seeing a colleague who is making an inappropriate comment towards someone else because of their gender, sexuality, or anything like that, and not just awkwardly looking on, but calling it out, asking if they think that's okay. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it in that setting, taking that person aside later and calling it out. Because I tell you, as someone who has been in situations where my voice has been completely ignored in the workplace, and someone else has said exactly what I said in a meeting 3 minutes later and pretended I didn't see it, for example, it makes so much difference if a colleague calls that out, and actually makes me feel seen in that moment where I don't feel seen. I have a friend, for example, who used to work in an office where they insisted, they made their pronouns very clear all the time in their email signature when they were speaking to people, and there was a manager who refused to call them by their chosen pronouns and constantly referred to them as he. And I can only imagine how it feels to be constantly misgendered, but that is just one example of ways that we can call out if we see someone doing that. So that's another thing, speaking out when we see microaggressions, prejudice, and the different ways that we can make people feel less in the workplace. Don't just awkwardly look on. And the third and last thing I'd say is check in with colleagues. I mentioned at the start of this talk that the last year has been a roller coaster for so many people across the world, particularly people who identify as Black or from an ethnic minority background. It's been hard in lots of different ways for many people, absolutely, with the pandemic as well. And that has also disproportionately affected some communities over others. And taking that time to ask a colleague how they're feeling, taking that time to check in and ask them if they want to grab a coffee, and not feeling scared to ask uncomfortable questions, because it's only through asking those uncomfortable questions that we are able to educate ourselves and we are able to understand how we can be better as a person and as a more effective ally. So those are my 3 tips on being a more effective ally. I've mentioned this in the context of technology, but I say that this applies more generally as well in our workplaces. The first thing I say is recognize that all of us have bias. There's no such thing as being colorblind, for example. Second thing thing is to speak out. Speak out. If you see it, speak out about it. And the third thing is to check in. Make sure people are okay, because it goes a really long way to feel seen. Thank you.
Great stuff, Izzy. You blow me away, to be honest, obviously, with what you talk about. And I want to just start by saying thank you for saying George Floyd's name as well. I think within the business community and the tech community, there was too much silence, certainly, obviously, during the last year. I also feel that there is an unacceptable silence in terms of this isn't the right time to have those conversations. So I say thank you for saying his name. And in terms of obviously identifying when something is clearly wrong, do you think that the tech sector specifically needs to be more vocal?
I do. I think that, when we talk about tech, we're talking about lots of different things. We're talking about the, the industries which, are really kind of taking over in different ways, challenger banks and all these things. We're talking about access to capital. We're talking about small startups who might be too small to think that they need to think about diversity and inclusion until they get a certain size and they're like, oh God, we're all 30 white men, And I think that there's a really great opportunity for tech in particular, which is very fast paced, which is very interesting and exciting for a lot of young people who are starting out in their career. And because of their size and their clout, has a really special place in our society in terms of really shaping the conversation about a lot of things. If tech companies are very intentional and specific and open and transparent about their approach to diversity, the rest of our society will follow in different ways. So I do think there's a really particular thing we need to do to build in inclusion into the tech space.
It's a great call as well. In fact, I said to Danny, who's listening here with me today as well, while we were looking at the questions I was perhaps going to ask you, and he said, how can it be that you have a discussion around the diversity and inclusion of your team if there is, say, only 2 founders and that's it? But you make a very valid point. Unless you have that structure in place from the very start, then you will very quickly scale into a non-diverse team. So it's about more than just doing the talking, isn't it? It's about having that policy in place from the very start.
It is, absolutely. And policy is one thing, but policy is simply a guide that gives us a structure to what we do. But culture eats policy for breakfast every time, to paraphrase.
Yeah.
And I think that the culture we build as an organization is so important. The culture determines how people feel when they come into that organization. The culture determines how we write job posts. The culture determines where we go after work, what that environment looks like and feels like for people from different backgrounds. Culture is everything. And I think being intentional from the beginning, even if you are 2 guys in a garage somewhere, about what you want that culture to be as you grow, can go a long way.
It's a great point. I'm going to use the analogy of the plane, and obviously over the last 12 months, we've not been able to jump on planes. In fact, the reason why we've had such a strong, diverse group of panelists over the last 2 days is because of technology and the fact that I'm going to guess you might not be in the UK. You were in Ghana last time I spoke to you. Is that right?
I'm now in London, so I have been on a plane.
There you go. You're
back. Saturday.
You're back in London, but there you go. But like, obviously, in terms of obviously that accessibility, do you think in a way the pandemic has allowed us to all be a little bit more diverse in terms of how we structure our teams? So for remote working, for example, or an event like this, where all of a sudden the international speaker is more accessible in that sense?
Absolutely. I think that the changes over the last 12 months or so have meant that individuals who typically couldn't commute into major city centres, or who lived internationally, have the opportunity to work for organisations that may have previously been accessible. I think if we let it, this period in our history will have a major contribution to fully remote teams with very, very distributed individuals, and that not being a problem at all. I think that we shouldn't take that for granted, though. I think that in all of that, there is a lot of work we need to continue to do to make sure that if we do have fully remote teams, if we do have teams with multiple cultures and multiple kind of backgrounds, that we are doing very intentional work to make sure that people feel supported, encouraged, that they understand what promotion looks like, that they know what a career looks like within that organization.
I'm going to, a little story, I don't mind obviously if you pass it on to anyone else, but I remember doing a panel in London about 4 years ago, and Suki Fuller, I'm sure you'll know Suki. Yes. Suki was on the panel. And I remember constantly, I still do this because I've lived in Northern Ireland a few years, and the word guys is used quite synonymous here, like using the word lads would be for boys and girls, and it's just a term that's used in that sense. But the panel I was on in London, I was actually the MC, and I remember Suki stopping me halfway through and saying that word is not acceptable in an audience where we're talking about technology, and we've already only got 15% females in the room. So can you stop using the word guys? And at the time, I'll be totally honest, I was like, whoa, I'm blown away with how awkward I feel. However, in reality, that was the best time for Suki to do it, because what she did is engage with 100 people, and it wasn't in a rude way. It was in a, this is educating you way. And I think obviously it was because of Suki doing that I changed my tone. And I think you're 100% right that we need people calling out when something isn't appropriate. So I thank you for making that point as well. The only thing I would like to ask from a local Northern Ireland perspective is, in terms of the UK, we're perhaps not ethnically the most diverse part of the UK. And what we do have, however, in common, certainly in terms of Foundervine, is the need to reach out to underserved communities much better. So we've got great universities in London, we've got great entrepreneurs, but how do we tap into finding the next generation of entrepreneur coming from underserved communities? Is there anything you can pass on that way that would help us?
So I think that, a huge part of our work is building the pipeline. So I think that when we started, we realized that, if you threw a rock in London, you'd hit 3 different accelerators. So if you're an established founder, something out there for you. However, there's an immense amount of work, personal work, professional work that goes into making any business. And if you've got an individual who comes from a community, any community, where they don't have access or they don't feel sort of represented, creating interventions that allow people to build networks, to pick up different skills, to access mentoring and support are so important. So from an organizational perspective, I think one really simple thing is opening your doors to younger people. How can you partner with local schools? How can you partner with local colleges to provide access to younger people who may not have the social capital to understand what it takes to work in your organization or to build an innovation in your sector? That's one easy thing that could be done. From an individual perspective, I mentioned mentoring, coaching is so, so important. I am a product of tens, if not hundreds, of people who have given me their time throughout my childhood, throughout my teenage years. And I didn't grow up in Northern Ireland, but I grew up in inner city London, Tottenham, where it was a very kind of difficult environment for a lot of people. And if you have the opportunity to leave, to get exposure to people and to institutions that are very different from your immediate surroundings, it just changes your perspective. You just think bigger, you think a lot differently about who you are and your relation to the ecosystem as well. So that's one thing I would say that's an easy win for a lot of organizations. Open your doors and make your people available.
It's a great answer, and I think we need to do a better job at that. And I think that's where hopefully we can come back to you, Izzy, and gain some more advice and knowledge. And I think it's taking best practice from those that have been there and done it like yourself. So I say thank you for your time today. It's been really invaluable to have you with us. I hope you can come back on in 12 months' time and we can report back to you on some of the initiatives that we've rolled out because of that early intervention work that you just mentioned. So Izzy, thank you very much. Obviously, you're more than welcome to listen in and watch the panel that follows next. But if not, I look forward to chatting to you again soon as well. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alistair. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers, Izzy. Bye. Wow, guys. There's food for thought there, isn't there, for all of us? Certainly including myself. Like, I listened to that story that she just mentioned, obviously the journey to the conference, the couple. Yeah, I think she made a great point. Was it two gentlemen that were sitting next to each other? Did we assume it wasn't? And I think there's so much unconscious bias that perhaps we all have that perhaps allows us not to think about all opportunities and all people. So I think Izzy's question there and that story was an eye-opener for me as well. So thank you, Izzy. I'm gonna now invite a number of people that are leading conversations within these areas in different fields. And it's a massive, massive panel. And obviously I wanna give it time. So I'm gonna hopefully get all of these folks to jump in now. So it's Gavin from Northwest Regional College, Rosemary from Allstate, Anne Orr from Boards 123, Shana from Think Lila, Michael from Aquatis AI, and Elaine from Crack NI. And forgive me if I've pronounced anyone's names wrong, and Christine to the right as well from Diversity NI. Darrell, lovely for you to join us today as well.
Great to see you here.
Forgive me, it feels like I've got a list of about 100 people that are joining in the panel. And the good thing is, and I'm going to call myself out on this, and Darrell, I will start with you on this as well. This is the most diverse panel that we have during Level Up in terms of both male, female, and ethnicity. Do you get frustrated that perhaps some of the panels that you get to go on are only around that topic? I know that your business is focused on that, but would you like to give us the opportunity to tell us why we need to do a better job of involving you in the whole conversation, not just diversity and inclusion? Is that important to you?
Yeah, massively. I guess the key really is that it shouldn't need to be about diversity and inclusion. You want really to be there on merit, and whether the topic is something as important as this, or if it's just general representation, it's important that you have enough faces in the room and enough diverse perspectives and backgrounds in every conversation, because ultimately now diversity and inclusion is in the spotlight, but on the other events that might run, that may not be the case. And those are as important, because ultimately people are looking at it and thinking, could that be me? Am I fitting into this industry? Am I fitting into this conversation topic? And if you don't see your face and you don't have your voice heard, then that's still a problem. So yeah, definitely. I've had a lot of different panel events where that's run through my mind.
Yeah, no, totally, Darrell. And I'm conscious of obviously tokenism when we do anything as well, and not wanting to feel like, for example, and this is not just an ethnicity thing, this is a male-female thing as well. I speak on behalf of someone who tries to make my panels at least 50-50 or 60-40, but there is always a concern of mine that someone might think it's just, they're on that for that reason, and that's certainly not the case. But I always want to question the panels that we have with Starticus in any event we do. Just explain what you do, Darrell, as well, because I think it's great what you've done and Pivot and Flair.
Yeah, so I am one of the co-founders of Flair. We are a people analytics company that helps organizations to measure and build anti-racist cultures. And yeah, we actually know Alistair from a while back with our previous business, which was a very different product, a consumer app for young football players. And last year, after the pandemic and after, I guess, everything that happened in the world with George Floyd's murder, myself and my co-founder, as two Black founders, looked ourselves in the mirror and said, where do we want to prioritize our time and the work we do? And we decided to switch gears and basically change company direction last year.
Yep, no, absolutely. Well, thank goodness we're not talking about football, to be honest. It's been a difficult time, obviously, for football. I'm glad you're working in that space, and certainly in the education space, where there is an awful lot more that can be done, obviously, in terms of creating, diverse workplaces and obviously the conversations around that. Gavin, I'm going to ask you from a local Northwest Regional College perspective, in terms of the work that you do with local employers, are there certain things that you set out in stone when, for example, you're creating like an academy program where you try to create certain targets in grouping all of the community into those programs? How does that work?
Thanks for having me, Alistair. My name is Gavin. I'm a careers advisor at Northwest Regional College. And we have, within the college, we have a business support centre. And we link very well with the local employers. They upskill or reskill or innovate research. They improve their business. So the business support centres work with companies like Fintrue and the financial services, Alchemy and software implementations. We've welding academies. We've free courses at the minute negotiated around Brexit and transportation and so on. So those courses, they're open. They're not, obviously graduates, but open to people who have an entrepreneurial idea, which has been the main focal point of this week, Alistair, and it's been a great event so far. And the Business Support Centre would work with businesses, and then obviously we have our student cohort then from all levels, from level 1 all the way up to degree level. Great partnerships with the Ulster University and Queen's, great partnerships with the local community. And within, the region, obviously, we have 5 campuses, over 10,000 students, but we engage a lot with the community. This year, obviously, we haven't been, maybe as engaged as we would like to be, obviously, with a pandemic. But we've really turned a corner, especially with the tech at the minute within the college, in terms of having online learning. It seems to be becoming the norm at the minute across the world, where, and obviously, I've had to adapt, we've all had to adapt to the online, but thank God we've got the technology to do it. And the Business Support Centre, within their academies, a lot of them are free courses. There's an application process obviously involved within it. Some of the academies are in terms of success, are 90% successful in terms of getting into employment. And the Business Support Centre would work with us in careers. They basically break down the barriers of education. A lot of our people in the city are reluctant to return to education, perhaps being out of education for a number of years. And it's simply the first barrier to overcome, our first obstacle is to come through that door and talk to someone in the college, like myself or the team or my manager, Fanine, about what we can do to break down those barriers and in relation to maybe their confidence. They haven't had the opportunity maybe from when they were younger, but there's courses for all levels, all abilities. Business Support Centre, yes, we're working with businesses on a very high level. But for me, we're student-centered, we're all-encompassing, we're impartial, we deliver really good CEIAG, which is Careers Education, Information, Advice and Guidance. So my advice would be within the academies and within if you're not too sure, the first point of contact is always the careers team. And I think careers now advice, something I didn't get when I came to the college here in 1998, careers advice is going to become more and more important now as we come out of the pandemic. So
obviously, just quickly touching on that, very quickly on the academies themselves. One of the things that has come out of business recently is the need to perhaps drop the graduate level for going into, say, an apprenticeship, to go into a tech job or to go into a placement within a corporate environment. I'm going to guess, and I don't want to second guess you on this, but the academy does that in a sense, obviously with some of the organizations you work with. How important is that to your ethos?
You're right. The graduate programs, they like Fintrue and Alchemy, they obviously look for a lot of graduates who come maybe back from across the water who are looking for employment at a local level. And I think that's the main point of these academies, is to keep our talent local, to keep them in Northern Ireland, the Northwest region, because a lot of students, including myself, went away for 14 years and luckily have come back. But we're trying to keep the talent pool, and our principal is very, very passionate about this, is to keep our talent pool in the Northwest, because the talent that we see in the college here and the local schools is excellent. But we work with prospective students, we work with potential students, or obviously our current students. We keep in touch with our students who've gone across the water. And at the minute, the academies are just the next step of bringing our graduates back and giving them a job at a local level within in the city, because there is more investment coming in. There's a lot happening. We're very especially with the city deal being signed recently. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening on our doorstep, and our job in careers is to get that known to our community that them opportunities exist.
So opportunities, and Shana, I'm going to then ask you, leading on from that, obviously in terms of what you're doing, and it's specifically within the advertising industry, am I right? You're looking to help obviously in terms of that diverse talent pool as well.
Yeah, so we've done a a lot, I think, within it. So essentially we did start off within the advertising industry, but actually what we're doing now is focusing on also nurturing talent within a business. So essentially what we do is we're a tech platform for the workplace, and we combine that inspirational kind of actionable learning with ongoing support, and we really foster those kind of safe environments. And a big part of that is actually the marketing and branding side of a business in general. And it's actually going through it with a very much like a fine tooth comb of who are your suppliers, who are you working with, are they diverse and inclusive, and what do you look like in front of the camera, behind the camera in campaigns. So it's really interesting. And yeah, because of my background, I've been in innovation and also within marketing. I've seen that where I haven't felt reflected when looking to the media, also not feeling a sense of belonging within business. So it's combining all of that and making sure that you can't just have the marketing kind of speak of we're inclusive without the kind of tangible changes within a business. So it's a mix of both. Yeah.
I see Michael nodding above, and obviously Michael is very passionate about changing the recruitment model. But Shana, just tell us what your business is before obviously we move on to Michael, just so we're giving that shout out, please.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Lila. Lila essentially is a DEI tech platform for the workplace. And what we're doing is we're combining really exciting online learning with ongoing support and gamification. So we have resources, coaching, and essentially our goal is really to not only help people lead inclusively, but live confidently in their own skin. So that's kind of me.
Yeah. No, and I remember us having this conversation, and you made a really valid point. I think of big corporates and their advertising campaigns full of diversity, but behind, like you say, behind the camera, what is there in terms of management structure to represent that diversity that they want us to think from the picture? And I think you make a really valid point there. And Michael, I'm going to lead on obviously for you to explain a little bit about what you're doing in terms of taking the bias out of that recruitment process, perhaps.
Yeah, nice to join everyone here. Incredible panel to be involved with. So I'm Michael, the co-founder of Equitas, and we have voice-led interview software to reduce bias in hiring and help companies build diverse teams. So what Shanna was talking about and what Izzy was talking about earlier is you can't say, hey, I'm colorblind. It just doesn't work like that. Everyone's got these inherent biases in them. There's an amazing resource that I'll share with everyone here, 175 plus biases, and you can kind of categorize them down into a few different areas as well. So there's a nice little cheat sheet I can share, just a bit of interesting information to read about. But what we try and help companies do is be super structured in the way that they hire, actually score people on the evidence, so not what they actually look like on a video back and forth from there, but focus in on the text and transcription. And now we talk about the different biases coming into tech. You'll love this one. I always make the joke, worst place to start a voice technology company is Northern Ireland. Reason for it, listen to how quick we talk, listen to the different regional accents on top of that as well. We see the bias come into the tech because whenever it comes to our transcription piece, the technology, not as accurate back home as in compared to London or the Queen's English, or even some of the America where they've built these huge transcription data out. So it's really, really difficult. And a couple of things you talked about earlier on as well, needing diverse teams right from the start. We're trying to do that and build it out. And it's hard whenever you're small and you're relying on your own network. You're asking for introductions. You don't have the budget of some other people, but it's incredible what some people are doing back home as well. And I love the organizations that have been set up. So Christine, just beside me there as well with Diversity Mark NI, is holding people to account and making sure that they're tackling lots of different areas at the same time on top of that as well. So recruitment and what we do is just one part of the journey, but you need other people like Shanna once you're in there. So you're nice and inclusive as an organization. You need Christine with people putting those policies in place and turning them into culture from there as well. And I'll stop talking because there's so many people get through on the panel.
Michael, what I love about Michael is the passion that he clearly shows with what he's doing. I worked in the recruitment industry. We're going back like 9 years now. And it was at the point where we started to take off dates of birth or when you went to university, because there was the assumption that you could work out how old someone was. That was as close as we got really in terms of diversity, in terms of the selection process. And that's talking 9 years ago. So there has been some movements in the recruitment industry, but we're not going far enough. And in terms of Christine, can you explain what Diversity Mark is doing? Because I think it's going to get to a point, Christine, where if you don't have the Diversity Mark, you're pretty much going to be someone that people don't want to work for. Is that the aim?
Well, we hope to have as many on board with us as possible. I mean, I started my journey with Diversity Mark 3 years ago now, just when the organisation had been launched quite just about 6 months before that. At that stage, we had 15 organisations on board and we've now got almost 90. So we're delighted to be working with so many organisations. But really what we are, we're a charitable organisation going nearly 4 years now. And so we enable organisations from all sectors, all sizes, all at different stages on their diversity and inclusion journey to join us. And thanks for the shout out, Michael, by the way. But to join us on their journey, and really what they do at the start of their journey is they analyse their data, they identify any barriers to underrepresented groups. They start off the journey with gender, looking at gender diversity. And what we ask them to do is come up with a strategy and an action plan to affect change. And you know, Alistair, that it's a very rigorous, you know, and robust process they go through, and the ultimate goal is to get an accreditation. So the accreditation is called the Diversity Mark. And so we have organisations working towards achieving and maintaining their Diversity Mark accreditation. And it really is vital now to have something like the Diversity Mark as a badge, you know, as a mark of progress, to really be able to attract and retain the right people to work in your organisation, to really you know, compete in the coming years and have that diversity and inclusion within your organisation. And it's about going beyond 100%. A tick box, you know, tick box exercise. It's about, you know, really driving real change and going on a journey to change culture.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things, if I'd had more time, I would have asked Izzy as well. Like I think obviously there's a little bit of, I don't know, within the established business sector and corporates, there could be an element of white papering, of like white documents, white labeling of stuff. Obviously you get all these reports that come out, and my concern is we get past that. I don't want reports, I want action. And I'm sure everyone on this panel can agree, white papers are great, but then you need to move on to the next step, which is the action. So I think obviously what you're doing, Christine, is so invaluable, not just in terms of obviously male-female ratio, but companies looking past that and understanding that diversity and inclusion doesn't just mean men, women. And I think that is part of it, but not all of it. So Rosemary, from an Allstate and I perspective, and we've worked with Allstate for a couple of years now, and all I can say is you have an international audience because you're an international company. So how important is it that you have an international employee network as well, and obviously recruit best talent from everywhere?
Yeah, it definitely, Allstate works across three continents. We have sites in Ireland, we have sites in India, and we have sites in the US all across it. And it's very important, much like what Gavin said, the first thing that sometimes gets in the way is the speed of our language. You know, I'm from Strabane. We typically have the fastest talkers in the Northwest based here. And, you know, whenever that frequency happens, you know, you have to work really hard to be able to ensure not only that your voice is being heard, but that you're bringing something to the table. You know, diversity is so important to Allstate, to ensure that employees' voices are being heard, that we're really, and you know, taking and harnessing all of that power, you know, the innovation that comes with it. So, you know, there mightn't be another me in Allstate, but it's really the collective that pulls together. And really, I think, you know, Allstate has been on the cusp of so many leading things with the company. And it's a company that's not afraid to change. It's a company that's not afraid to stand up for its values and say, you know, we have a place for everyone here. And that, you know, when you come to Northern Ireland, you think about our three sites, really, you know, everybody has a seat at the table, everybody has a voice, and we can see it through our diversity and through our employee engagement group. So it's hugely important to us.
It is, and I thank you obviously for being part of this discussion as well. I think sometimes bigger organizations probably feel like they have to prove more, but I think the point that Izzy was making, that structure of equality and diversity and inclusion happens whether you're a team of 2, whether you're a team of 3,000. So it should be no different. And Elaine, please tell me, I'm so bad with pronunciation and reading. So.
Okay, it's my name is Eileen, and
Eileen, so sorry. Eileen, I I just obviously wanted to find out a little bit more about Crack NI. I don't think we should not have this conversation in that there's been awkward times within Northern Ireland history and over the last few months where someone's ethnicity has been brought up as being being potentially less Northern Irish. How much do you think we've come forward in terms of as a society to make sure that everyone is included in conversation here in Northern Ireland?
Okay, I'll put my quality hat on. Yes, we have come on quite a lot. It took us over 21 years to get the race relations order into Northern Ireland. We didn't get that till 1996. And then after that, we have Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Agreement that has there are various different categories. So that means there's a statutory obligation. So we have come on quite a lot. It's just, you know, the amount of work that has to be done with it. And that's what you're talking about today, Alistair, that, you know, placing the talk into action and talking, not meaning just policy work and the tick box exercise that can come along with it. So Section 75 is unification in Northern Ireland, and that comes from our Good Friday Agreement. So we come from that aspect. Yes, we have come on, but it's just what we do with that is the matter, you know, what we have to concentrate on.
Absolutely. So obviously, I'm going to go back to something which sometimes people get confused with, and I'd love you to give me a definition on this. So what is diversity and what is inclusion? I think some people kind of get confused that they're potentially the same thing. If you can answer that as well, that would be fantastic.
I will, and I'm going to fall back on my Chinese. Diversity means in Cantonese, "da yin fa," "da" meaning lots, variety, and ways we do things, ways you create things. So if you think of diversity in that aspect, and just think how diverse we are in ourselves, we all have different names. You know, I know you got my Eileen wrong. I actually have a Chinese name, which is Eileen, which is why I've got Eileen. Yeah, so we're diverse even with our own names and stuff. So that's diversity, if you've got that. Inclusion, and falling back on Chinese, means bao po. And I really thought about this. Bao means wrap, like, you know, like a Christmas present, if you're going to wrap something. Po means put it all together. So you're wrapping everything together, and just think of the parcel that you do wrap up at Christmas. You're trying to put them all together as a gift. So if I simply say that's the way to explain diversity and inclusion, I hope you've got it.
I think that's fantastic. And it's actually a new way of considering something. And that again in itself is obviously making sure that inclusion is part of language as well, isn't it? It's obviously the way that we classify names, for example, is so important. You mentioned names. Darrell, obviously from your perspective, and being based in London, do you think obviously there is more acceptance of someone's culture in terms of obviously in the workplace now as well? Obviously that the background, the history of where they come from, is that more important to employers, or again, is there some lip service that's done to that?
There's definitely a lot of lip service. And I think one of the key things is that some organizations believe that if they achieve diversity, it will automatically achieve inclusion. And in the surveys that we've done, sometimes we find that the levels of inclusion are actually lowest with the organizations that have the highest levels of diversity, because it can really bring to fore some of the issues that exist around, for example, unfair practices and people feeling different to other groups. So ultimately, I think diversity doesn't lead to inclusion necessarily. It can do in some cases, but organizations need to really realize that they're two related but distinct things, and they need to get right. And even within London, that we're seeing exactly the same thing, where some companies are basically paying lip service and trying to achieve things that are noticeable and easy to see on the outside, but in reality, on the inside, when you go into the firm, when you speak to the people, when you understand the actual culture, you realize that they might be diverse, but the inclusion side of things just isn't there at all.
So Darrell, you don't need to obviously name a company. That might be it's up to you. But is there an industry where that is quite prevalent? I'm just trying to obviously picture it. So obviously it helps obviously in terms of that discussion as well, where there is a diverse team, but there isn't that inclusion in thought.
There's a range of different industries. If you think of kind of the industries where there's high representation of people from diverse backgrounds, I guess healthcare is one example where if you look at, for example, the NHS, it's an incredibly diverse population of workers. However, there are a lot of inclusion challenges that are faced. So I guess for organizations and industries that are further behind on the curve and are really trying for diversity but haven't yet reached that stage, they should look at industries like that as kind of a warning of this is what happens when you have diversity but you don't get the culture right, because ultimately you then have issues around retention, around progression, and around people not thriving. And I think it's quite difficult for organizations to really have that foresight, especially when they're so far away from having diversity in the first place. They think, I don't need to focus on the inclusion piece, but trust me, when they get there, they'll have the same problems unless they fix it from the get-go.
It's a really great point. And I think we sometimes think that diversity is the answer without thinking that we need to create a workforce that is inclusive and offers opportunity. And Shana, really, with what you're doing, that's part of what you do, isn't it? It's about allowing there to be a pathway.
Sorry, I'm just taking myself off mute. Yeah, so it is all about small actionable steps. We find like DEI in general, it's overwhelming and you don't know where to start. And what we do is actually create tailored kind of journeys for every individual to take that step and confidently kind of take that step as well, because it's just so important to not only look back and celebrate your wins and show how far you've come, but also start small, and you build confidence over time and over the years, that you can start going up layer by layer and layer, the more you learn and the more you take yourself on that journey. So yeah, it's all about that. And we are really about being proud of how you're taking that first step and you're really kind of making change to think about your biases and learn and understand and acknowledge. So yeah, it's really exciting. And it's great as well to see the difference as people go along that journey, that there is initial that fear of, oh, should I kind of stand up if I notice something in a meeting, but making sure that you are taking those steps and eventually doing that just builds confidence, and knowing that it's okay to get it wrong and kind of fail, which was great to kind of hear from you, Alistair, about that, about it's okay to get it wrong, because that's how we learn.
Yeah. And sometimes we assume it's about how something makes us feel. And the point is not how it makes us feel, it's about how it makes the other 10 people feel that have been impacted by something we've said. And that's why I've changed the way I use the word guys in emails. I don't use that word anymore. Just because it stops me from perhaps saying it out loud as well. And Rosemary, from an Allstate perspective, are the things that you have set in stone as a company that you have to adhere to, or in terms of language, are there things that are briefed to you? How do you make sure that your language is appropriate to an open audience of everyone?
Yeah, you have to work incredibly hard at that, because, you know, we are working at a global scale. We're working with different cultures, different backgrounds, all of that. And, you know, when you're thinking about your high level strategy, it has to be accessible to everybody. You know, everybody at every seat needs to be able to understand and feel connected in a way, because how I connect to it may be different to how somebody else connects to it. And it's bringing our employees to that table to allow their voice. So whenever we're thinking about goals, we're thinking about strategies, thinking about, you know, what is it that we need? In all honesty, our employees is the barometer and the health of our company. They tell us by if they're going to stay with us or if they're going to walk away, you know, and companies that are getting it right are having people stay with them. They're having a really big, rich, you know, they have an environment that's rich with innovation and inclusion and everything with that. So really, it is hugely important to get it right.
Yeah. And in terms of, I would love to go around, and this is an open question for everyone, but limit it to 30 seconds, perhaps, as much as possible. Can everyone think of a good example of a company who are leading the way in how they're approaching diversity and inclusion? Someone that you would like to call out in a positive way and say, this is someone that's doing something good. Anybody straight up? I don't mind who goes first.
I can come at it from a recruitment perspective, Alistair, because that's my background, and I 100% agree with Darrell and Shanna in that even if people get it right during that recruitment phase, it all falls apart if you're not inclusive with your employees, how you go in there. On that piece, there's amazing speakers you should listen to within there. So Amal Rajan, in terms of the BBC, he's got some incredible documentaries on that. And there's also Andy Iam based in London, who's an incredible speaker on how to invest in the margins. So some really interesting pieces on that. The companies that I used to love to work for who had this at the core values and how they hired. So there's 3 of them in general. So B Sky B was amazing within the contact center hiring space, high volume, Transport for London and the prison service. So for Transport for London, they said, look, we want a workforce that represents the city that we serve. And at the entry levels, they were incredible at practicing that with their interviewers and the people that they got in, the attraction campaigns, everything they did early stage in that with the department I was involved with were incredible at representing that sort of dream that they had. And the prison service, they used to assess people because the prison was obviously such a diverse mix and range of people. They used to assess whether candidates would respect other people or not, and really tested them and challenged them with some really, difficult scenarios to get through as well. So there's ways and places of doing it whenever it comes to that recruitment piece. And yeah, if it all falls apart, if you don't put the steps that Darrell and Shanna said in as well.
Good call. Eileen, any suggestions from your end?
Yeah, at Crack and I, we do inclusion diversity training. That's our main thing, under our own mission of cultivate and respect, appreciate and inclusion across cultures. And one of our clients I have a lot of, admiration for is Sensata Technologies. There are over 19,000 employees, 13 countries, but we have our plants in Northern Ireland with Antrim, Carrickfergus and so on. And in the early days, Adriana, I think some of you know her, Nova, contacted me to look at, cultural awareness type courses for the company. I believe totally in cultural awareness. We heard Izzy speak earlier about cultures, but cultural awareness is the foundation, is the key to understanding, to be culturally competent. And sometimes we forget to do that with diversity and inclusion work. I'm not saying just, enjoy your food, but enjoy your food and understand why you enjoy that food. What is behind it. I mean, I don't know, those are one of my skills, and I'm going on a tangent, but I mean, I improved in my cooking over lockdown, and that was partly because we have a cultural cuisine with me course, and my trainers have influenced me to improve. But Sensata, I mean, they've been absolutely amazing. Adriana set up a BME support group in there, and then has lots of the other affinity groups, working with women, other areas. I've seen them take part in the Mela. They've been just absolutely fantastic, quite a diverse group, who are led by the employees to inform the direction of diversity and equality in the place. And, I just think that's a good way to work. So it's really, I started life in total quality management. I didn't really start in community sector, which people think I did. So I did fashion, textiles and production management. And I totally believe in top-down, bottom-up approaches. And I can see that in, if you just look at their website, you will see a range of services that they are working at. And that just shows, the commitment they put to it. So Sensata would be one of my favorite. Yeah.
Excellent. And I think it's a really good kind of thought around the food part as well, obviously. Christine, just before we go any further, you will be sharing some great tips with everyone just straight after this panel. And this will be around obviously any person who works in business, or whether it's a personnel manager or a founder of a business or a manager, and some actionable tips on how they can look at diversity and inclusion immediately. So I think it's probably unfair of me to ask you to name one, because you've already got 80 or so on that diversity mark, but Allstate, where are they at in that journey?
I know I'm not just saying this because Rosemary's on the call, but we have 3 levels of accreditation at Diversity Mark, and everybody starts out with bronze. And at the minute, even we're nearly 4 years down the line, we just have 4 silver accreditations. It just shows you the standard that's required. It's not something that's easy to get, which is good and important. But Allstate were the first organisation to reach the silver accreditation. They're wonderful, and they actually were fantastic in coming along and sharing with us their journey on a webinar, which we actually recorded. So if anybody wants to watch about an hour's webinar, it's on our website. We have a global resource pool there with over 150 reports and resources. and it's in there amongst the 150. So you can go in there and watch that at any stage. But yeah, definitely just the fact that they were the first to come on board with us at the very start, and they were the first to get the silver. I mean, there are many others. I mean, obviously Sensata, as Eileen mentioned there. Adriana is actually, we have a group of diversity buddies, individuals from organizations that have been on their journey with us for quite a while now, and they volunteer their time to help others that are starting out on their journey with us and work with them. And so Adriana is one of our diversity buddies. She's wonderful at Sensata. But we also have like Danske Bank are wonderful as well. They were the second organization to get the silver. But I mean, we do also really support and encourage the smaller organizations as well. Like AMS just got their silver there. They were the third or fourth, I think, to get the silver. Slice as well, are a smaller tech company. You know, where it's really important to support the smaller organizations as well as the larger organizations. And then globally, I mean, Sodexo, I don't know if you've looked at them, but they actually in 12 years increased female representation from 17% to 55%, which is quite unbelievable. And they've over 50% now women on their board. And they also increased gross profit by 23% just in that period of time by actually striving for diversity. So that was in relation to gender. So there are lots of global organizations to look at for good practice. Even like Johnson & Johnson is another good example of an organization to look at as well for family friendliness.
Good call. Yeah, no, totally. Anybody else? Anybody that they want to give a call out to and say, you know, well, you're doing a good job?
So Ben & Jerry's are great for really fighting up and standing up for what they believe in. They're really transparent, and it's just great to have a look at the way they communicate. They're really open and honest, and it's just, it's a great company to actually look at their outward facing comms and their also internal facing comms. It's really great.
Yeah, I would second that. In fact, in terms of their communication, their social media platforms, it's activism. They're very direct, and obviously if someone calls something out, then they will be they'll activate back. And I think that's brilliant that companies aren't silent when someone is derogatory about someone else, that they call them out directly. And I think it's brilliant to see that as an organization. Darrell, anyone that you can think of that is doing a good job?
Yeah, quite an interesting one. So Flair works with a lot of schools actually. So predominantly leading independent schools in the UK. And that's one sector that's had a lot of flack in terms of basically creating an environment where people go on, they become leaders of the country, leaders of different businesses. And people often say that the problems when it comes to diversity and inclusion and anti-racism stem at youth level. And I think last year, a lot of schools that we work with really took a brave plunge in terms of looking at themselves in the mirror and trying to understand what their problems were. That's despite the fact that schools don't have the same kind of negatives of people leaving, retention rates and things like that. At the end of the day, if a student lives in a certain catchment area and their parent takes them there, then they're going to stay in that area. So they don't have the same kind of concern of, oh, if we don't get this right, our children are going to leave our school. That's a very rare kind of instance. And yet they're still looking to really understand how included do our students feel? Are they having a good experience? How does that differ across different groups? So I'd really commend schools for that reason, because they don't have kind of some of those business needs to be focusing on this, and yet they're still starting to really take it seriously.
Yeah, just on that, sorry,
cool.
Darrell, we have 2 primary schools actually joined us on their journey, and they're wonderful, and the head teachers are just inspirational. St. Ronan's in Newry and Holy Evangelists in Dunmurray. So really, really progressive principles there driving this, which is so important. The younger, the better. We need to drill this in, even from nursery school, the importance of diversity and inclusion.
Alistair, can I just jump in?
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just thinking what Darrell said, and Christine, I forgot, we have a tender contract for over 4 years with the Childcare Partnership. We've trained over 400 childcare practitioners, and I just want to put a shout out to them. So it's the Department of Health goes down to Childcare Partnership, and we get the tender. We work with them, but it's the childcare workers that can come in the evening twice a week, twice in 2 weeks, straight after work, and spend 3 hours with us in training. is incredible, because I would be absolutely exhausted if I'd been working in a childcare setting and then come out and go for an evening class. The thing that I was seeing in it, an analysis of it, is it's very strong. They really work in an inclusive environment. They make their childcare and nursery settings very inclusive. They're really interested in supporting the child's development. The second thing is we've come from it thinking such great strength and foundation for the children, but it's not continued up to secondary school. And we know from research in Northern Ireland that between Protestant and Catholic communities and community relations, things happen when children become start to know difference when they're about 3 years and over. If we apply that the same in our intercultural settings with nurseries, and we can continue it, there'll be great strength. So there's a lot of it can be done, you know, but I'm just saying the childcare setting was a great place for us. And I'm going to put a shout out to all those practitioners that came over those number of years. You know, we've been out there in the winter and snowy nights, and they still arrived in the evening class. No evening class was less than 20. So it was incredible for us, because we didn't feel like going out on a snowy night to go and take an evening class, but they came out and they really wanted to change their setting and to make sure they would have those a comfortable place for all kids coming from different languages, backgrounds there. So yeah, just a shout out.
No, it's extremely important. And I just want to say my final shout out to is all of you guys that are doing something. And I say guys, and I've used the wrong word, all of you folk, perhaps I should say. But I think you're all doing a wonderful job in your individual industries to make sure that that conversation is had. And I even say, obviously, from a very local Derry Strabane perspective, Gavin, the work that you do, obviously, within the careers department at the Northwest Regional College, I don't think you're giving yourselves enough credit when you were speaking at the start about how much accessibility you're offering people from social, economic, poor backgrounds, the opportunity to have quick pathways into really good jobs. And I thank, obviously, the Regional College for doing that. I think it's such an important stepping stone. And certainly from an academic perspective, we can't assume that degrees are for everyone. And I think having those apprenticeship schemes and allowing people into the tech sector that don't feel like it initially is for them is so important. So Gavin, kudos to the Regional College as well for the work you do. Michael, I know that you said to me, and this was brilliant, I hope you don't mind me saying it before we go, Michael said, I will be on this panel, but as long as it's diverse. And he said to me, I will assess that panel a week or so before it. And if I don't feel it's diverse enough, I will help you to make it so. And I think that is the job of Michael, me, and other people, obviously, from a more male white background who have had that privilege to make sure that panels are diverse and workplaces are diverse. So Michael, a thank you to you as well for making sure that I was going to follow that pathway. It's so important. Guys, we have to jump onto the next section now. But thank you ever so much for your time. Christine is going to be doing a presentation around how anyone within an organization consider how they can shape a diversity and inclusion policy. So please stick around for that, but thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Right, we're just going to go live into the studio for 1 second, and then we're going to jump to Christine, who's going to be doing the presentation. So Christine, if you jump off there 1 second. Yeah. Great stuff. What a great bunch of people, but it shouldn't be that we're just waiting for those people to do stuff. I think that's the core thing that we've got to do. We've got to ask individually, what can we do in our workplaces, in our schools, in our houses to make sure that we all level up? And that is something that allows fairness to be applied everywhere. So we're going to go to Christine, who's going to talk now and do a 20-minute or so presentation based on obviously how, as a manager or as a personnel manager or someone within the company, you can increase diversity and inclusion. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's really brilliant to be here today. What a fantastic event. And thank you so much to Alistair for having me. So as you know, my name is Christine White. I head up an amazing third sector organisation called Diversity Mark. And I'm delighted to be here today for such a worthwhile and important topic. So personally, I've been on the diversity and inclusion journey now for 3 years. with Diversity Mark, and I'm fortunate to be in the position of being aware of what works and what doesn't work when it comes to organisations taking the first steps to moving from talk to action when it comes to D&I. So I've tried to summarise my thoughts on really the first steps that you can take in your organisations in around 15 minutes. And I'll be delighted if you even just take one action away from this today. So a little bit about Diversity Mark. So we're a charity founded in 2016 by Women in Business, and we are the awarding body of this Diversity Mark accreditation and the leading authority on diversity now in the UK and Ireland. So the Diversity Mark recognises and identifies companies that have been independently assessed and have reached a high standard of commitment to advancing diversity and inclusion. And the journey with Diversity Mark starts out looking at gender, and it evolves then into all areas of diversity as the journey progresses. So organisations on board with us have access to a network of like-minded organisations, a global diversity resource pool, diversity buddies, quarterly roundtable events, and they also benefit from expert annual independent feedback. The Diversity Mark is the mark of progress. It's the mark of a progressive company. So you can see there, just from this slide, the companies from all sectors, all at different stages on their diversity journey have joined us. And they're working towards achieving and maintaining their Diversity Mark accreditation. And this accreditation really does highlight the organisations that are committed to building more diverse and inclusive workplaces to benefit all employees. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the steps. So obviously we've got a wide range of organisations on board today on this event, and everyone's unique and on a unique journey. So I've tried to make this very generic because everyone is obviously, they'll be working on different things and at different stages. So there is a huge difference between organisations that have senior level buy-in and those that really just don't actually understand the true value of diversity and inclusion. So the first step is really regarding senior level buy-in. So are the senior leaders in your organisation aware of the compelling business case? And in many organisations, the answer is no. It's really an education piece. So the difference is clear. For example, organisation A will treat diversity and inclusion maybe as a single initiative owned exclusively by the HR department. They might think it's the right thing to do, but it's more of a tick box exercise, and sometimes they pay lip service to it every now and then. And employees probably see it as a tick box with no authenticity. Organisation B sees really diversity and inclusion as a growth enabler and a key to every decision within the organisation. They look at everything through a diversity lens, and every individual leader is bought into the value of belonging, both intellectually and emotionally. Leaders are authentic and visible champions for equality, diversity and inclusion, and it's up there reviewed at board meeting. Leaders are equipped to make the story their own and feel it within themselves, to be able to explain why they care, why it matters, and why it should matter to direct reports and colleagues. In fact, Danske Bank view their diversity journey with us as instrumental in actually enabling them to grow and expand their knowledge base across all facets of their business. So to get from organisation A to organisation B, that doesn't happen overnight. It's very much a journey, and that's something that Diversity Mark that we can really help with. But the first step really is the business case, but get the leaders bought into the business case for this. So let's look at the business case. So in relation to gender diversity, it's quite often seen as a woman's issue, but this really is a business issue that needs to be addressed at most senior level. And that's been backed up by countless global studies involving thousands of organisations spanning back years. So McKinsey and Company, for example, found that gender diversity is a key to financial success. And their researchers delved into the leadership composition of 1,000 organisations in 15 countries. And they compared the makeup of their diversity against their financial performance. So they find that for every, for the companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on senior executive teams, they were 25% more likely to have above average profitability. So we've got the Australian government have carried out an enormous piece of research over the last 6 years involving 11,000 organisations. And they now know that this is also a key to financial success. So they have many reports out, but one of the stats from that is that for every 10% increase in key management personnel and females, that led to a 5.8% increase chance of outperforming in the sector. So Glassdoor found that 2/3 of job hunters indicated that diversity was an important factor when evaluating job offers and companies to work for. Employee satisfaction. If you get this right, this will improve your employee satisfaction, reduce turnover. It'll reduce conflict between groups and improves collaboration and loyalty. And Deloitte found that innovation really does flourish. So diversity drives innovation. And they found that it increases by 83% when employees feel included to use their own voice, and that their organization fosters diversity and inclusion. Global image, it's really important to think about your image and your brand. And that goes beyond your employees, right out to your supply chain, local communities, and wider society. And really economic growth. PwC recently actually produced a report, and they found that Northern Ireland's economy could benefit from as much as 2.3 billion if the number of women in the workplace was increased to the same level as the UK's top performing region. In relation to global economic growth, Harvard Business Review last year produced a report. If we take action now to advance gender equality, that could add 13 trillion to the global gross domestic product by 2030. So as you can see, just from me picking out just a few bits and pieces there, it really does highlight that this is a business issue. It's not no longer the right thing to do. It's really the smart thing to do and also the right thing to do. So step 2, analyze data, identify barriers and act accordingly. So analysis of data really is key. You can't change what you can't see, feel, hear, understand, or quantify. So auditing the system or achieving systematic change requires qualitative and quantitative data, and that should be measured regularly. And that's something that we help with at Diversity Mark. We give a framework for that. So any data that's analysed should be reviewed with a key team of stakeholders, such as senior management team, HR, recruitment, management, but most importantly, the most important stakeholder in your workforce is your employees and your underrepresented groups, and also younger employees in the entry level. So it's important to include really a wide range in relation to looking at the data and what are the barriers and what should be your plan of action. So when you identify barriers, for example, at our most recent quarterly roundtable event for our signatory organisations, we looked at gender balance at senior level. 33% of our organisations found that lack of part-time and sort of the burnout culture at the top was a key barrier. 28% said that lack of succession planning was also a key barrier. So they were able to identify their barriers and actually come up with a plan of action around that. So the next step really on the process, once you've analysed your data, it would be to develop an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. And that would be the first thing that our organisations do at the start of the journey, unless they already have strategy in place, of course. The aim of this activity would really be to come up with a living document which outlines the values, principles and goals of your organisation when it comes to gender diversity and inclusion. So your strategy should include how this links to your company values, core operating model and growth strategy, and it should be really easy to communicate internally and externally. So step 3, it's difficult to actually drive change and make this happen if it does just fall maybe with the HR department or 1 or 2 people in your organisation. So the more enthusiastic and positive people you can involve, the better. So a top-down approach drives compliance, but not commitment. So from senior leaders to frontline employees, every individual must see and understand their role in company culture. So focus groups or working groups or whatever you would like to call it can be really invaluable when planning or implementing change, starting or reviewing your inclusion and diversity journey, or even just enabling you to hear staff views in relation to a particular issue. So organisations on board with us have seen success in driving change using diversity working groups. And they would really encourage enthusiastic and energetic people in those groups. And the more diversity within these groups, the better. So being involved in a working group can actually really be an excellent development opportunity for individuals because they can take ownership of tasks. And this also spreads the workload rather than a couple of people trying to drive the change. And it's really imperative that if you do actually implement a diversity working group, that this group meets regularly. And it can be useful for there to be a charter for the group and it really needs executive level sponsorship and support as well. So step 4, if you're starting out with diversity and inclusion, make a statement, make your diversity goals visible internally and externally. And we have a charter at the start of our journey, which the most senior level in the organisation signs, and that can be a really good visible commitment as well. So as you progress on the journey, tell the story, tell it in many places as possible, but on your website and any way that you can. So companies are becoming increasingly aware of how important it is to create an inclusive employer brand. If I were a high potential, extremely talented young person, looking on your website, what impression would I get? How long would I stay on your website? People have short attention spans these days. They don't stay for long. So think about that. Would I feel excited about a potential career in your organization? And would I believe that your company values align with my own values? So step 5, inclusive recruitment practices. 67% of candidates say that diversity is an important factor when they're considering a company to work for. So job seekers want to know what you're doing to increase diversity and inclusion in your company, and which is a big reason to improve your recruitment practices. So you can think about your job descriptions thoughtfully. Think about gender neutral language, and there's a system called Textio that can help with that. Think about blind shortlisting. So in relation, for example, to maybe gender, age, and ethnicity, remove names and schools from job applications. So the shortlisters, there's no unconscious bias there when they're shortlisting. There's no opportunity for that, and we all have unconscious bias. And then consider your interview panels. Are they diverse? Will they put somebody off, or will they really support them and encourage them? And consider role models as well. So try not to go for clones of yourself, and that's human nature. We quite often look for someone to do the job that maybe are like ourselves or like the person that was in the role previously. So diversity of thought will pay off. So step 6, employee culture and employee experience. So if you do attract the best people into your organization, will they stay? So consider this. Some organizations may have a culture of presenteeism, employees feeling like they'll get a tick in the box if they're always there and they're working late. There may be a burnout culture as well. So the culture comes from the top. Do employees wear their burnout badge with honor in your organization? If they do, you're unlikely to retain diverse talent, especially working families and women. So do managers lead by example? Do they leave early? Sometimes. So just think about that. So if you can make kindness a central feature of your culture. So if this last year has taught us anything, it's that who you're with means something when the stakes are high. People will remember how they were treated, especially during the pandemic. They will vote with their feet if they weren't sort of treated with compassion, trust, and kindness. So there's probably room for improvement in all of us. So organizations that value kindness and inclusivity at the core will have a leg up moving forwards. So be bold and clear about who you are and what you stand for and what you reject as well, and don't tolerate bad behavior. So culture audits can be helpful and will give you a benchmark to improve on. Be in listening mode as well with your employees. It's so important. So step 7, lived experiences. You can really use this to really champion and enable others to really feel for the experiences of maybe a minority group. So take an intersectional look at every person's journey can bring much needed perspective for all of us. So if you can even consider diversity awareness days and months, and maybe have internal events or external events to share people's journeys, and that'll give people from underrepresented groups an opportunity to tell their story. So when a person with a lived experience takes up employment, especially at a senior level, they can be seen as a key role model and embodying hope for others. So you might decide to maybe do lunch and learn sessions or breakfast sessions or even virtual events. People get to hear individual stories of their people's journeys. And that's sometimes the closest they'll come to an understanding of what it's like to walk in their shoes, and give them a deeper understanding of another person's struggles. And that can be uplifting and emotional sometimes, and helps to break down barriers. So step 8, development of talent, and succession planning. So talent mapping involves identifying the capabilities, experience, and potential of your current employees and aligning that with your growth strategy, and that will help you reveal talent gaps and development needs. It will help you identify the stars within your organization, and you can work on their personal development and get them ready to participate at senior levels when the time comes. So really, it helps you retain your stars. And we would highly recommend, development and mentoring programs. And for example, in relation to gender, if maybe your shortfall at the senior level is females, women in business have fantastic suite of development programs for women, and also an external mentoring scheme. So an external mentor really can be valuable for individuals. So that has really just been a key summary. I've tried to do it in about 15 minutes. And again, everyone's on a unique journey. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this session. I'd love to talk to anyone here today, not on board with Diversity Mark, about how working towards achieving and maintaining the Diversity Mark accreditation can really transform your organization. And if anybody has any feedback or you'd like to get in touch, my contact details are on the slide here. So thank you so much.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you all for your attendance and participation at our Level Up event as part of Derry City and Strabane District Council's Enterprise Week of 2021. I'm sure you'll agree that the caliber of speakers that we've had over the last number of days has been nothing short of inspiring. We've seen business leaders, local entrepreneurs and community experts giving their opinion and their advice to all of our new startup businesses as they now enter into the field and try and expand their business, which I think is very, very exciting. And I genuinely wish all of our startup businesses all the very best. I want to thank Alistair and Lee for organising this very, very informative event on behalf of Derry City and Strabane District Council. And I want to just send out a message to all of our local businesses, and particularly our local entrepreneurs and startup businesses, that we will do everything that we can within council to support you over the next number of months. We understand that it's going to be difficult in a post-COVID society and in a recovery process trying to start up a new business and maintain an existing business. So please know that we are on hand to help and support you as best we can. And I know our business team are very, very keen to get involved with all of you. So please get in touch if you can. I genuinely wish all of you the very, very best over your future business endeavours. And I hope that all of your success comes very, very soon and your business continues to grow right across the Derry City and Strabane District Council area.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you, Mayor, as well, for being here and obviously passing on your thanks to myself and Lee. I have to say the thanks goes to everybody that was speaking, the panelists, the attendees, the startups. We've had some really important issues discussed. I must also pass my apologies on to Anne Orr, who was on the last panel and wasn't able to join for some reason. So I do apologize, Anne. Anne has a company called Boards 123, and it's looking to kind of make sure that you can shape your board management structure. And they have diversity at the heart of what they're doing. So Anne, apologies that you weren't able to jump on there for some reason. But obviously I hope to join you at a later date and we can have a chat and make sure it goes out on social and is recorded as well. Anne's doing some great work in that area. So make sure you have a look at Boards 123. So we've had 6 topics discussed over 2 days. I feel like I've run a marathon, to be honest. All I would say is if I've run a marathon, everyone working over the last 12 months must have had to run to the moon and back because it has been tough. And all I would say is for all that toughness, there's been so much adversity shown, so much brilliance and innovation and ideas to support the economy. And it's all been from the bottom up as well. Yes, there's been some support elsewhere, but it's all come from you guys, making sure that you drive your businesses forward. And the key subjects that we talked about were smart places and rural innovation, the future of retail and the high street, what are we going to do, entrepreneurship and innovation, health and wellness, social purpose, and most importantly, at the end, I think, social inclusion and diversity. Leveling up is not just about during the pandemic, it's what we're going to do afterwards. So I'm delighted that you've joined us over these last 2 days. Now, the NI startups find out which one won in their startup pitch competition that we've been running over the 2 days too. So if you want to join that, just go on to starticus.eventbrite.com You've got about 5 minutes to book a ticket, and then you'll find out who the winner is. We're also going to hear from Anne Lawler, who was last year's winner for her business and what the last 12 months has done for her. And then we're also going to hear from Claire Nixon, who is from Real Time Recruitment, who are the co-sponsors of the Startup Pitch competition. So thank you ever so much for your time over the last 2 days. Thank you to the Derry and Strabane District Council for having the vision to put on something like this. Thank you to Unit 7 for the production and all the work they've done behind the scenes. Danny McLaughlin, thank you all for running back and forwards, grabbing me coffees, brushing my hair, all of that kind of stuff. Francesca, thank you for joining us yesterday. I thought it was brilliant to have Fran with us. I've missed her today. It's been like ant but no deck. So thank you to Fran there. She was yesterday sitting there. And last but not least, thank you, Lee, as well, sitting at home, literally glued to her chair for the last 2 days, doing social constantly as well. Thank you ever so much. We'll hope to see you next year. I'm not too sure what we'll call it. We had Line Up in 2020, Level Up 2021. Come back to me with some ideas on what we have next year. But until next time, we'll see you soon. Cheers, buddy.
Soaking our shoes clean through to the soles, and the wind blew through us for a shortcut. I wasn't built for this locale. We were making tracks in the snow. Guess we're pretty good as it goes. What's in the past is in the past, it's in the past. Lives ago. And the lampposts lit up like a runway, stretching as far as I could see. And the sound of the crunching and crackling, I swear it was rattling through my bones. We were making tracks in the snow. Guess we're pretty good as it goes. What's in the past is in the past, is in the past. Miles ago. We were making tracks in the snow. Guess we're pretty good as it goes. What's in the past is in the past, is in the past. Miles ago. We were making tracks in the snow. It's easier if you clean as you go. What's in the past is in the past, is in the past. What's in the past is in the past, is in the past. What's in the past is in the past, is in the past.